Okay, so here we are, another great interview with insiders and insider information for your perspectives. We're going to pull the curtain back a little bit on the wizard called REI and see what's behind that curtain in Oz. And we have with us Sam Horn, who after 7 years, he's in transition to another career, but he's was with REI for 7 years. He went to Washington State University. He's a Cougar, got his degree in business, marketing specifically. Sam, welcome and thanks for taking time to be here with us.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. It's good to be here.
Yeah. Now, what was your first job coming out? Well, let me ask you this. What did you do to prepare yourself in the business world, to gain experience while you were going to college? Did you do anything business-wise that way?
Interesting. I think the biggest thing I did coming out of college to get into business and marketing was working in an internship. I was very lucky to have family members that had worked in the Seattle market and could put me in touch with some local organizations that I was interested in working at. And I was able to land an internship with a event nonprofit company that does like marathons and triathlons, and they do a Blue Angels air show, city parade, a bunch of stuff in the Seattle market. So I interned there for 2 years, and then that directly led to a full-time opportunity.
Was that a paid internship?
It was not the first year.
Wow. So you bit the bullet and just, one thing I've noticed in these interviews I've been doing this in this term in this class is that a lot of people took advantage of opportunities and did the work for a year for free. Well, you're giving the work in exchange for, what did you get out of that you think was valuable?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing was being able to show them how I work, and my attitude and my personality and the way I problem solve and things like that. And I think that's twofold. I got to see inside them and who in that organization might I be interested in working with, who looked like a good manager, a good boss to work with. And it was just short term. It was, 2-3 months in the summer, 2 months or so. So it was, a sacrifice in not getting paid in that sense, but at the same time, it wasn't, an indefinite amount of time. I do think that, to your point, kind of biting the bullet and I've had multiple times in my career where I've chosen between options, and that the option I chose was for experience over a paycheck.
Was the end result worth it?
Certainly, 100%.
So kind of sounds like you were auditioning for that first year, and so you're putting forward your best so that either they could write a good review of you for a letter of recommendation, or they said, "Hey, this guy's so great, man. We need the." Yeah, I've seen a lot of that. When I was in the publishing industry, I saw that people come in, either temp work or part-time, and if they were good workers and they were like, hey, snatched up, because it's hard to find good people. What'd you do after that?
So after working for the nonprofit company for about a year and a half, I went and worked for an ad agency in the Seattle market, little privately owned, about 150 people ad agency. And I was an account executive, which effectively I'm kind of like the interface between the ad agency and the creative staff and the producer and the print producers and all those kinds of back end people and the client. And in my case, the client was T-Mobile USA, their telecommunications, kind of that whole business. Our agency specifically did all of the in-store experience for them. So when you walk into a T-Mobile store, all the digital monitors, all the posters, brochures, and that meant it was either about devices, if it's the launch of the new iPhone or a new Samsung phone, or it's about kind of T-Mobile programs and services like rate plans, upgrade programs, things like that. So I was kind of that interface between the two organizations. And that actually led me to my next job, which was T-Mobile hiring me. My clients at T-Mobile hired me across after about a year and a half, 2 years working at the ad agency. So yeah, another good opportunity.
Okay, so then after working for T-Mobile, then you went to REI.
Yeah, yeah. So I spent
I mean,
about
you couldn't just come out of like, come right out of college and got your degree and shown up in your like ideal, position of, VP of marketing for REI. You just couldn't have shown up and gone, here I am. Where's my parking spot in my corner office?
yeah, not quite.
Okay.
Uh,
Why REI? I mean, you obviously,
mhm,
one way or another, you made a decision, right? At
mhm.
least on your part. What interested you about REI? And then we'll start getting into kind of the recreation, leisure,
Yep.
consumerism, consumption, society perspectives. But what interested you about REI?
Yeah. I think what interested me most about RI was that it was just finally getting into the outdoor industry. I, for a long time, had always loved spending time outside. It was part of what my family enjoyed doing together, going on camping trips and, lo-fi, just kind of hanging out outside on weekends together is where we did a lot of bonding. And I think once I came out of college and started to mature a little bit more, I found myself doing more and more outdoor activities, and I really felt the power of kind of spending time outside and the effect it had on me as a human, as an adult, uh, and just my development and my perspective on life and things like that. I just learned so much, and I had so many valuable people I had met in spending time outside, and so I naturally thought, gosh, like I'm not a big fan of telecommunications and cell phones and things like that. It wasn't interesting to me ever. Um, T-Mobile was a good experience because I got to see inside a big Fortune 500 company and how that all works. But for me, I wanted to be able to try to help other people spend time outside, and that REI seemed like a really good opportunity for it. Frankly, that was the first place I could get my foot in the door. I had for probably 7 or 8 years been applying at jobs at Brooks Running, a bunch of Seattle-based companies. Brooks Running, Outdoor Research, Eddie Bauer, and REI. And always, I mean, I was going to the point where I was applying for jobs that were things that I had done 2 or 3 years prior just to try to get in the door, and never got anything more than just kind of the blunt kind of traditional response from HR that is thanks, but we went forward with another applicant. It was kind of like the boilerplate.
So what was the magic key? I mean, everybody wants to know, what was the magic key that opened the door for you?
So there was a guy I worked with at the ad agency I was at. He went over to T-Mobile. I went over and worked with him at T-Mobile. And then it was a friend of his that was working at REI at the time. And I had gone on a couple ski trips with him and, had a beer or two with him here and there. And we just had become good friends. And I had at that point when we built that friendship, he wasn't working at REI at all. He was working for a pizza company. And he got a job at REI, and he was on the interview panel. They were kind of looking for a new staff member, and he gave me a call, and that got me in the door. And it frankly got me in the door at a level and in a position that I might not have been able to like break through if I was on my own. So for me, I've said this all my entire professional career. Every job I've gotten was at a place where I had a point of contact. I knew somebody and someone could vouch for me to get in. That has been the most instrumental piece of my entire career.
So basically who you're through your network or networking. Okay. And I got to take a pause real quick just to brag on Sam. I mean, this guy is the quintessential hyper outdoorsman, recreationist. He plays golf, he surfs, he sails, growing up in the Puget Sound area. He backpacks, he runs, he bikes, he mountain bikes, he's a fly fisher, rafts. I probably missed a bunch of stuff in there somewhere, but he does it all, man. You probably haven't climbed Smith Rock or Monkey Face yet, but
yeah, I've tried.
Other than that, you've pretty much covered the ground.
I tried the rock climbing. Yeah, I couldn't get into it, but pretty much everything else I've dabbled in. Yeah.
Now, when you got into REI, you're going, hey, this is a co-op, right? I mean, help us understand what that means, maybe even what it meant to you coming into REI when you first, came in, you started learning about and experiencing this thing called a co-op. Help us
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah. So REI, for people listening here, is the largest member-owned cooperative in the United States, and it's retail oriented for the outdoor specific. It was founded in 1938, so it's been around for a very long time. I think when I joined, I had been an REI member since I was a kid. That was where my family would shop for a rain jacket for me and things like that. And I was an REI member. I think I joined when I was in high school or college. I needed to buy a backpack or something like that, and it was $20 to join, and I immediately got a discount on the thing I was going to buy. And that $20 membership joining fee was a lifetime thing. And other than that, I didn't really think much of being an REI member. And it wasn't until I was there that you started to really grasp what it meant to be an REI member, and how important that was, in terms of a group of people that can work together, can speak up together on behalf of this organization, or this organization does it on behalf of its membership group, to get people outside, to vote for public lands, to, try to source more sustainable apparel or gear to get outside. Because as a cooperative, which is what REI is, the whole entity is owned by the individual members. So me as a member, I own a super small share of the organization, as well as the other 17 million members. It's super diluted, but nonetheless, it was an opportunity to be a part of something bigger than myself. And I think working there, that was just the biggest thing that really sparked me, was to be able to go to work every day and help kind of represent other people that are passionate about the outdoors, with the spirit and the intent to try to bring more people into that community.
Oh, what a great function of an mission, right? And yet, you still operated, within a competitive free market system, right?
Yeah.
That we call capitalism. And you're the marketing guy, so you're trying to trick us and manipulate us into buying product, right? Or help us understand that part.
Yeah, of course. So there's a couple of facets of it, right? Like, what is our market share relative to other brands and other people that are selling outdoor gear? That's one way that we can think about our business. And that's both, REI is interesting. You walk into the store and you can buy a tent from North Face, or you could buy a tent from REI. And so the cooperative has a kind of our product categories have a funny lens to them in that sense of, how much do we want to sell of our own product versus, trying to be able to sell another brand's product in our store. So product market share is one way to think about it. And I think the other thing that's really interesting is, trying to compete for your discretionary time and your discretionary income. How do we incentivize and inspire people to choose to go for a hike outside instead of going to happy hour, or choose to go for a run after work instead of, another thing, something else, because it is discretionary space. It's not seen typically as like a requirement, like we do food, shelter, water. So
you're the reason my secret excellent fishing hole is no longer a secret and it's like dry, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm teasing you. Well, I would guess, right? It's like when you start playing sport as a profession, right? It's like, is it a sport or is it a business, right? Mm-hmm. When I was working for a Christian publishing company, it was like, wait, is this a ministry or is it a business, right? Mm-hmm. Now, on the 501c3, right? That's a nonprofit label, right? I mean, whatever you're turning to IRS, if you're a business, then you're a for-profit business, right? And so sports, as a professional level, is a for-profit. The publishing company I work with, even though sometimes they'd say, hey, we're a ministry. Other times they'd say we're a business, but they were registered as a for-profit business. But REI is like a co-op, and yet you're still you're still in the marketplace, right? Competing.
Yep.
And you're still doing business practices. That must have been challenging, maybe for you or maybe not, but certainly within the corporate culture. Was that, and how did people navigate that space?
Yeah, I think that's a very, what you articulated about the publishing organization, it can be very similar to REI in the sense of, the way their leadership team looked at it is, our purpose, our mission is to get people outside and steward the outdoors. We can't do that as an organization without running a healthy business. So it's kind of they are inherently connected to each other, which means that we're never really going to make a choice for one without being considerate of the other, which was, I really appreciated it. I enjoyed it. But for me personally, I think that the big thing I ask people when they are interested about getting into the outdoor industry, because they have a passion about being outdoors, is to ask them to be kind of introspective about what it is that they love about the outdoors, and if there might be a better avenue for them if they're pursuing to get into that industry, because what I found out working there was I love to get people out, help people get outside, and I don't necessarily want to do that through the sale of commercial goods. I'd rather do it through education or stewardship or other type of activities, as opposed to just getting you to buy a new pair of shoes.
Well, and REI does put out a lot of informational videos, videos or documentary type clips. Yep. Of which, that's pretty cool, right? For a for-profit business to be doing that. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that there's some marketing benefit to that as well, because you're kind of owning that space, right? And you're kind of the go-to, and then you get brand recognition. But speak a little bit to, because I know you're tuned into this kind of perspective, speak to our cultures, I don't know the right word, focus, movement toward, the latest, greatest. You got to have this gear and you got to have that gear. And, and the technology is just in part, right, is driving this to some degree, mm-hmm. because technology allows new products, lighter materials or stronger materials that are still light. There's all kinds of, and yet we get on this treadmill, and you just said, it's like, I don't know that we need to sell products to get people outside. We can learn how to enjoy the outdoors, but yet we get caught. Why do you think it is, or what are the dynamics that we're caught up in this consumer materialistic, consumption focused? What do we get out of it? Mm-hmm. Who makes that wheel go round?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where do I start on that one? That's a tough one.
It is a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. What I'll say is that as an organization, REI as an organization is in the business of selling commercial goods. So if that is their livelihood, then inherently they need to continue to innovate and push and kind of change the way in which people recreate outdoors, to continue to be relevant in the consumer's mindset. So the day in which they rest on their laurels and they say, well, last year's backpack was, as good as this year's, is the day in which they stop kind of challenging themselves. And I think you can take it's the same mindset that we take when we as individuals think about, going for a run or exercising, or why do I go for a hike at times. Is an aspect of this is that I want to be healthier. I want to be a better person, a better, healthier individual, whatever it might be. And it's that same mentality that you have to bring into the business effectively, and the culture, which is like, we can do better. We can produce better products. We can help people get outside in more efficient and more effective ways and more inspirational ways, and help whomever that might be, helping us get outside of what had been the kind of traditional norm outdoors person, looks kind of like me, and trying to help someone else that might not be as, considered as traditional or have, as much experience in the outdoors, like help welcoming them in and making them feel comfortable and giving them kind of avenues to progression in terms of recreating outdoors. So it's like innovation manifesting itself in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. How does social class play into this, right? I mean, and I'll even broaden it beyond REI to some degree, because I know you're involved with, I don't think I mentioned skiing, but you do a lot of skiing as well.
Yeah.
And you go to the ski slopes, or that's mostly where I see it, right? And you see vans or SUVs, and they're plastered with bumper stickers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or stickers, like product stickers. And there's even like a certain, I mean, you can look at one car and you can compare it to another car, and you can see class distinctions just on the stickers on a car, let alone the car itself, of course. But how does this space of recreation intersect with the space of stratified social classes, of who participates, who gets access, how does that all manifest itself in the outdoor recreation?
Yeah, I think it's a really fun exercise anytime you run into highly qualified guides, and just take pause and think about what is, or to do some internet research on what is it like to become a guide in any activity area outdoors, mountaineering, river rafting, fly fishing, backcountry skiing. I've seen guides and gone on trips with guides in every single one of those facets, and those lifestyles are very hard. At one point, I considered taking a guiding job in cycling internationally, and it sounded fantastic. I would live in Italy for months at a time and lead small group cycling trips around the Italian countryside. And what I found out was, you worked as a contractor, you got paid $100 a day, and when you weren't leading a group that day, you weren't getting paid. And there was a house that you got to kind of like stay in that was like the guide house, but otherwise you were responsible for your own health insurance, and you were making that relatively low sum of money for the day. So these guides, they have so much expertise and so much knowledge, and they get to spend every day, in these destinations, in these lifestyles that I think we all really love. The opportunity to float down some of the most scenic rivers in America or in the world, or backcountry ski, just beautiful untracked powder is, it's things that gives us goosebumps thinking about. But here they are. To get there, they have worked or lived what I would sometimes refer to as like the dirtbag life, out of a van or out of the back of the truck, and roaming and working in different pockets of the globe, to be able to maintain that lifestyle. And a lot of times the customer that they're catering to is wealthy.
Uh-oh, I think I lost you. Okay, let's pause this recording for now. Okay, we're back. I don't know, there was a glitch somewhere. So, okay, go ahead and keep on going.
I guess I don't know where I left you off, but just kind of one of the things I've seen in the guiding background and kind of outdoor industry is just the difference between, kind of the dirtbag lifestyle of a guide and the clientele or the customers that they take. And the cost of those trips can be, multiple thousands of dollars. So it costs to get exceptional access like that. And that cost is either, me as a customer paying out of pocket to get there, or me as a guide putting in years, and, not necessarily making the big money for a 401k, to be able to work in that industry long time.
Well, I even think about like, rafting down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon, right? And it's almost kind of like tickets, for sporting events or plays or operas or musicals, where you go to try to if you can afford to access, right, those ticket prices, which again, that's a class distinction as well, is do you have the resources to access the gear and transportation to the place. I mean, not everybody can access the outdoors or the gear required to have a reasonably good experience in the outdoors. And then people, Ticketron and Ticketmaster and all these people, they buy up these tickets and then they resell them for a profit. That puts it even higher. Yeah. And then you get into these venues and there's the nosebleed seating way up in the left field, right? And then there's the behind the pitchers or behind the plate, the baseball game. And that, is another stratified, if you can even get into the stadium to begin with. But I was thinking about, river rafting down the Colorado through the Grand Canyon. A lot of these guides, they get their permits because it's permitted. Only so many people get down. And then, then you're upcharged if you want to go with a guide, right? But then how do you get the experience? How do you get the equipment's expensive if you want to do it on your own? Or if you want to somehow split the cost, you get the cost down. Even getting access to a permit, and then what percentage of your overall income does that whole trip count for? I mean, if your disposable income is just fractions, that's a big trip, right? But if your disposable income is tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, you can do the mule, helicopter, whitewater rafting expedition trip, for $12,000 a person and eat really good food. And so how do you, as being an outdoors person and in that industry, for the 7 or 8 years you were with how do you justify or make sense of all that or not? Or what's the issue with that?
Gosh, that's a tough one. So
access. So think in terms of like who has access to outdoor recreation regarding like income, access to transportation gear, stuff like that.
Yeah. What I think a lot of people come to experience as they spend more time outdoors, when it comes to access, is that surely there are places like the Grand Canyon where permit systems exist. And that's significantly narrows the access for the vast majority of people. I'm going to have to pay to get there one way or another. I do think, though, that as you become more experienced, you start to, the universe around you kind of unfolds and you start to see, how might I be able to have a really great time outside of those points of interest, like the Grand Canyon, that just draw such a wide group of people. Such a big audience base is why, supply and demand, right? There's a lot of people that are trying to get into that thing, and there's not a lot of seats that are allowed. And so those are naturally the points at which price starts to increase. What I think is also interesting is to sometimes step back. Last night I was at Foot Zone in Bend, looking at trail running shoes with my brother, and the North Face came out with a brand new collection of trail running shoes. And North Face has dabbled in shoes before, but it's not the brand that we all think of when we think of like who makes really good shoes. We think of Nike, or we think of Hoka or Saucony or Adidas. There's multitudes of brands that have been making running shoes for a long time. And then there's a couple of brands that dabble and they'll try every once in a while to marginal success. The North Face just came out with brand new trail running shoes. And I was talking to the sales rep yesterday about it. And what he pointed to is they have 3 shoes. The first comes in at about $110 for a pair, which is kind of middle of the road, middle of the market on price across multiple trail running shoes. The second pair comes in about $130, which comes in at kind of the higher end of, it's more expensive than about 80% of the trail running shoes in the marketplace right now. And, kind of premium feel to it. And then they decided to launch a third pair of trail running shoes that comes in at $200 and is like way out in front of every single pair of trail running shoes that's out in the market. 190, 200, whatever it is, it's somewhere in there. And it just goes to show, I think, that, you know, trying to do innovative things, trying to price yourself. I think it's really fascinating to step back sometimes and just look at the shoe wall as a whole. And you can almost look at it as kind of a grid of like price and, you know, forms of technology in it, and start to understand what does that price point mean, and what are they trying to sell you on. And they specifically look for kind of gaps in these price grids and try to design and fit product and technology into pockets of those grids. Every brand does that. Having worked in the outdoor industry and met with a bunch of them, like they know their suite of products. We have prices from low end to high end, and somewhere.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Because like if I'm trying to sell, like golf clubs, right? So I might have, if I'm like, say, Titleist, right, or Ping, or whoever's the manufacturer, I'm going to try to have a line that I can sell to people that are entry level, people that are. I mean, golf's can be an expensive, especially in Central Oregon, can be a pretty expensive activity. But you can shop around and get discounts and find ways to kind of work around, the green fees or the price point entry level. But yeah, and then you go to the higher end. So if I was like, say, working for Ping, which is I golf, so that's my favorite club, right? But even like Ping has like these way upper end, things where you can especially with technology, you can take these little end things that you screw into the end of the club, and it's got a Bluetooth sensor, and it'll tell your iPhone, how fast your club speed is, and all kinds of electronics, range finders, and I mean, I grew up playing a little bit of golf. I'm not much of a rangefinder guy, but I play with people that do, so it's always kind of fun. They get out their rangefinder, how far is it to the flag, and they press the button and all. I'm usually certainly within 10% of their almost all the time. I can pretty much guess about where we are, because that's what we did before technology, right? Yeah. And the other thing that you kind of mentioned is like, I'm a very average at best golfer. Yeah. So how much is this technology going to not only improve my game, but then to even step back further from that and say, well, why am I playing golf? Am I to play for the relational engagement and fun and outdoors, and certainly not for the exercise if I'm taking a cart and not walking, but being outside and being with guys, and competing is fun, and the jabbing that goes on and stuff like that. But it's kind of fascinating. So so if you're marketing, right, then you want to be able to, I guess you're going to want to be able to market to the different stratified levels of society. Certainly in a competitive marketplace, if you're not providing those different levels, and you mentioned 3 shoe levels, let's say, at least if you're not at least providing 3 levels and updating each level with the latest and greatest. I mean, I know like Ping, for example, the golf club manufacturer, has hired people away from NASA, aerospace engineers, to design club heads that are more efficient through the air, where you can get more speed because there's less drag on the design of the club head. Yeah, it's like crazy, right? But that's what. Let me ask you this. Yeah. So, we've talked a little bit about capitalism, and yet part of capitalism is you're trying to meet the needs of the consumer. How much of that is true, and are those real needs the consumer has, or are those you're in marketing, or you were in marketing, right? So it's like, are you putting those ideas in our heads that we need this? So are you creating the desired need, or is it truly like, no, I want?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's like multiple schools of thought within marketing, depending on what area you focus in, right? So for parts of my career, in marketing, working in an ad agency, it was largely trying to create need, trying to create desire and aspiration for this thing. And other points in my career, it's been about creating products and kind of testing and learning and trying to find where market and opportunity is within the business or the program that I'm working on. So like kind of two schools of thought. And that second one I think is interesting because the mindset is effectively, we have an idea, we see the kind of the customer behavior, the data that's out there in the marketplace. I talked about the grid of shoe prices and technology, and we see, there's kind of a gap here. What can we create and plug in there, and then what happens? And can we start to take market share from other shoes around us on that price grid? So that whole product management mindset is very much like a test and learn. We want to move really fast. We want to try just put out an initial kind of concept. Maybe we even just like tease what that thing might be and see what kind of response comes from it. And then that informs, should we up the price a little bit? Should we dial down our technology a little bit, our costs, our technology a little bit to better fit the customer to be able to capture the most amount of market share? So it's kind of, the phrase that gets used a lot is kind of putting customer at the center and trying to fit what they need, fit what they need to help.
Or at least tap into their perceived need. I mean, my brother works in a graphic design marketing website. That's his business. He owns it and works there. And his approach to his clients are, okay, let's talk about not what your business is, but why your business is, and why are people wanting to use, what's your perception of why your customer wants? Are they trying to gain knowledge? Are they trying to gain status? Are they trying to gain, what is it that they're at? What motivates them? And then to market or tap into trying to meet that existing need.
Yeah.
Or perceived value, I guess is a better way to say it, right? Because it's like, what do you value? Well, I value knowledge. Well, if you value knowledge, then that you're going to market to if that's what you see the number one value of your customers being, is that they're coming to you to gain information.
Yeah.
You're going to try to market. What do you see as people that are buying REI or shopping at REI? What is their perceived value that you're trying to meet, or we're trying to meet at REI?
Yeah, I mean, so for REI as a retailer, they produce goods, they sell goods manufactured from other companies. To me, what I've always believed, and I by no means like speaking on their behalf, is that it's about being able to, it's that entry point to the outdoors. My personal story was when I came back into the outdoors and backpacking and mountaineering in my 20s. I was going on a mountaineering trip. I was going to summit Mount Rainier, and I got a gear list that was super long and had a bunch of stuff on it I'd never even touched before. I had no idea what it was. But I could go to REI and it had everything. It had the jackets, it had the equipment, it had all the apparel. It was all there in one shop. And so I got all that stuff and I went on that trip, and then I went on the trip afterwards. And over time, I started to have a better understanding of what types of brands supplied gear, what types of those types of gear were better fit for me, or represented different types of mountaineering or different types of outdoors people. I'd come across, I'd meet guides, or I'd meet people that were active in that sport, and I would, I see one guy and I'm like, gosh, he's so hardcore. He was really cool, and he wears this brand.
What made him so cool?
He lived in Montana, and he would bounce back and forth between Montana and the Pacific Northwest for guiding, and he would fly fish guide, and then he would mountaineer guide.
Yeah, but why was he so cool in your perception?
I think he just had this like mystique. He was like, for lack of a better term, he was a badass. Like he could climb super fast and never look to break a sweat. He was always super composed. He was always like really compassionate and kind to people and the guests that were around him. And it seemed like everybody that was around us, like either on our clientele, like of the clientele or the other guides, he had great relationships with them. You know, I was just like, oh man, this guy's cool. And he always wears this brand. Well, maybe that's the brand I like. And then I go look a little bit more of that brand, and they have cool inspirational videos of other people that are like this guide. And I say, yeah, I want to wear that brand. That brand, for whatever reason, aligns with my like personality and mindset and my own aspiration. And then we just start that kind of wheel of like, okay, I like this brand more. And to come back to what I was saying of like, I started with REI, the biggest possible funnel. And I came down into a select number of brands that I would turn to, whether it was aspirational or it was off of fit and quality. There's always kind of some combo of those things.
Right.
Durability, things like that. And I, would then go source directly from those brands that I knew and trusted most. And I didn't really shop REI as much.
Yeah, it seems like the other thing too, that as with my limited experience, shopping at REI, it seems like they have a level of, I trust them, I trust their knowledge and their, so, if I, need answers, or some places whatever the segment of the industry you're shopping in, some places seem to know more and care more. REI seemed to fit that niche. Couple more questions, and then I know your time's valuable, and as are the students. I don't want to take too much of the students' time, but I mean, this stuff is so good, man. You can't get this stuff, in a textbook. It's just incredible. So, now, okay, you're manufacturing, or you're selling other people's manufactured goods, shoes, backpacks, tents, stuff like that. A lot of these things are made in China. And that's that's a contested area of, what's your take on that? I mean,
so, well, made in China, or just.
And when I say made in China, let me preface that anywhere where, you got sweatshops, and it's always there's two perspectives as well, right? It's like, well, you're taking advantage of outsourcing to another country because labor's cheap. What are the conditions? And yet it may be, for that, within the context of that community, it might be on the upper end of the pay scale, and the conditions may be better, but not great. But yet companies are going to take advantage of those opportunities, because you can, if you're going to compete in the marketplace for price, right, you're going to have to some degree be, to some degree, okay, I guess. I mean, I don't guess you don't have to be, but what's your take on that?
Yeah. What I'll first add is that, to that notion, is that, it's made overseas. Sometimes that's south of the border. Sometimes that's in Asia. And especially in the outdoors industry, the vast majority of the product that's produced, agnostic of brand, across all brands, Patagonia, North Face, Outdoor Research, Mountain Hardware, etc., whatever it might be, they produce, especially in the apparel space, a lot of that stuff's produced out of a small set of factories, and they're producing, today we're going to run a bunch of jackets for Patagonia, and the next day we're going to run a bunch of jackets for the North Face. And I think, we talk about labor and wages. I think the big revolution that's come recently is more and more brands you see pushing harder into, we are only producing products out of fair trade certified facilities, which effectively, interesting, you can Google fair trade production and whatnot and go get a good education on what that means. But they're still producing in overseas destinations, but they are ensuring that there's a good working wage, that it's safe working conditions, and in a lot of instances, they're actually investing more into the families and the community in which the factory is operating.
Okay, that's good.
You see, it's interesting to see brands who have for a long time talked about quality and durability and like pinnacle performance now start to swing their narrative over into fair trade certified, sustainability, all those types of things. And I think it's one of those things that as a brand, it's a lot easier to do that if you've already established the credibility of durability, and things like that over time. But
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I mean, those are challenging issues, right? And they're contested areas for sure. And it seems to me like, based on what you said, the marketplace does kind of drive those things to some degree. Otherwise, companies wouldn't respond to the degree that they are and starting to communicate through advertising and marketing that we are, mindful of the environment, mindful of good labor practices, things like that. So we do have power as consumers to some degree. Well, and if you're not aware of the power you have, then you have very little power. But if you're aware of the power and take advantage of it,
yeah.
and of course today in this social media cancel culture, we have the ability to. I think. Well, let me ask you this: based on your perspectives and being in corporate. How concerned is corporate to the power of social media and this new thing we call cancel culture?
Yeah, I mean, social media as a whole. So the first story I'll add to that is the first job I had out of college, this little nonprofit in Seattle. I joined the organization. So I graduated college in 2008. I was a freshman in college when Facebook was invented. Washington State University was one of the first, couple dozen universities. I had a, university email address so I could get onto Facebook. I remember being in my dorm, the dorm room next door to me, my buddy, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I found the study group through a girl on Facebook, and she's, invited me to the study group." And I was like, "Oh, cool, maybe I'll check this thing out." And flash forward to working in this nonprofit, and businesses were starting. Facebook had opened up to be not just for college, university email logins, and businesses could start to, create profiles. And my boss at the time was an old school PR guy, and he said, absolutely no social media, because it's a completely uncontrolled environment. I can't give the talking points to the news reporter from the Seattle Times and allow us to paint a clean picture of what this event might look like. I'm worried about any user coming into our Facebook profile and posting inappropriate photos or making comments that we then have to try to manage. It was a nightmare to him. That said, we were able to talk him into starting a Facebook account. And because of that, because of that Facebook account, we were able to just crush our event sales that year, because we effectively said, join our Facebook page. We'll give you a discount on registrations for that year. And, we saw the biggest registrations for the history of the company that I was there. And they were like, okay, cool, this is good. It's a community. It kind of like naturally monitors itself. I guess fast forward to now, modern day time. You have social media teams at organizations are, especially in the marketing department, it's one of the largest teams in the marketing department. Almost always there are special third-party organizations that they pay to help monitor and maintain the community, moderate conversations, things like that. It is a huge investment, and it's a huge part of marketing communications as a whole. And I think, the question of how is this going to go over in social media? What is our response? How do we engage in this topic? Is a daily, if not multiple times daily, conversation that happens within the leadership team, within a marketing organization of any kind. They are just hyper aware as to, how might we engage in the topic at hand, whether that's Black Lives Matter or, women's rights or whatever it might be, any topic, sustainability, climate change, like everything, every brand now is trying to be cognizant of like, where do we have rights to play and where do we not? And then how do we navigate these moments in time and still be able to put out a message and show it relevantly, without, coming off kind of blind to what's going on, and looking like we're trying to get too much profit out of something, and all kinds of reasons. But
yeah, I mean, I would guess you have to really walk that line, and walking that line to be informed on, what are the consumers saying, and how do we,
Yeah.
what's the, yeah, and you said it perfectly.
Yeah.
Last question, probably, and that is, you were, how many years were you working for REI?
About 5.5.
And you've only been out a couple months, so let's just say 6 years. What were the changes you saw, in the 6 years you were there, as it relates to um, doing business in the recreation and leisure industry?
Yeah. Um, I would say that the recreation and leisure industry is getting a lot smarter and a lot better at what they're doing in terms of running their business. I think for a long time it was kind of this sector, this industry that just kind of putted along of, it had its core constituents, its core customers. And as Instagram has grown in popularity, spending time in, the outdoors, these like beautiful vista photos, we all living in Central Oregon, Smith Rock, we all know the Instagram destinations at Smith Rock or in Bend that are out there. Central Oregon's full of them. And so that said, it's just the demand for spending time outside has only increased. And subsequently, because of that, I've seen in the time I was there, I saw more and more people coming into REI, coming into the outdoor industry from very high caliber other industries. The people that had spent careers at Procter and Gamble or Starbucks and had MBAs or other multiple graduate degrees, who could be considered for high level positions at a Microsoft, choosing to come into an REI because the industry now pays better because it was is a higher demand thing. There's more revenue, there's more profit. It's stiffer competition. We're going to pay better to bring in the best talent to grow our business most aggressively. I think that's the big thing that I saw in my time at REI was it really shifted from a lot of people that were there for 15, 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, there's people that were on my team that spent more than 40 years at REI. And in the time I was there, it had really evolved to, pulling in some of the best talent from the region. They had past experience at the best ad agencies and the best other industries, Facebooks, Googles, Amazons in the country. They were all flocking into the outdoors.
So as revenue, jumped, right? And you started, already started as like this co-op of, encouraging people to get in the outdoors and enjoy how it seemed like there was a potential, at least, right, with the profit motive, and that increased, and there was a profit motive way back, right? But as the revenue increases and the stakes get higher and people are coming in with more credential degrees and they're going to go take you to the next level, how did that change the co-op culture?
Yeah. I think the big narrative that was talked about was, just being comfortable with change and being invested in change. There were at times can be rifts in any organization that's going through change. This is talking to people that were with me at REI when I started and have transitioned into other organizations. Things they saw that were mirror images of what we saw at REI were effectively like the new regime and the old regime, and both groups saying, we need to do this. No, we should do this, or we can't do this thing because, the old regime saying we shouldn't do this thing because of these 5 reasons, and the new regime saying, well, we should try it anyways because these other 3 reasons, and it was very much an us versus them. And I think that the most important thing I learned through that, being there through that type of experience, is that we cannot navigate problems and change with an us and them, 2 different groups. We just got to come around the table and both got to listen openly and honestly and work together through whatever the problem is at hand. Respect the people that have been there for a long time and seen cycles of things, and respect the new, energy that's coming in and the new ideas, and work together on whatever the project is that's at hand.
Wow, that sounds like a great universal message that we could all use in our own lives, right? Because we're so seemingly polarized and balkanized in today's society, and yet we all have to work together and to, like what you said, work together and listen and hear each other. And, and that's a great way to end the interview, right? On that hope of what you, the vision you gave us for, the challenges and how to meet those challenges. So, Sam, thank you for your time and your insights and your wisdom, and certainly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. It was super fun. Appreciate it.